The sky split apart like a wound. Flaming debris rained down on the rocky fields of Colony Epsilon 7, painting streaks of fire across the twilight. People panicked, alarms blared, but one man didn't run. He watched the largest burning mass fall behind the nearby ridge, curiosity flaring in his chest. Eli Voss had been a scout, a soldier, and now a farmer. War had taught him two things: how to survive, and when something wasn't natural. And this crash wasn't a meteor. It had control, intent. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and climbed the ridge alone. What he found was beyond comprehension. The crater was massive. Metal fragments from what looked like an alien warship were still smoking. And at its center, buried under wreckage and slowly moving, was a beast. No, a dragon. 20 meters long, scales like black obsidian laced with glowing gold veins, wings torn and smoldering, eyes shut in pain. Its body was armored with biometal plating, yet it bled from gashes that hissed on contact with the air. Even injured, its presence was overwhelming. But what shook Eli wasn't its size. It was the collar. A thick restraint clamped around the dragon's neck, glowing with alien script. This dragon had been enslaved. He should have turned back, called the colony's defense force. But something in the dragon's breathing, shallow, labored, stopped him. He stepped forward. It stirred. Its massive eye opened, pupil a burning ring within molten gold. It looked at him, and didn't kill him. Eli dropped to one knee beside its head and reached into his med pack. He started sealing wounds, using every survival patch he had. The dragon didn't resist. It growled, low and thunderous, but it didn't burn him alive. It let him help. For hours, Eli worked. He didn't ask why, didn't care. Maybe he'd gone mad. Maybe it was the soldier in him, refusing to leave a life behind. Or maybe it was the look in that creature's eye, of betrayal, of loss. When he finally collapsed beside it, exhausted and bleeding from shrapnel, the dragon slowly coiled its tail around him, not to crush, but to protect. The last thing Eli heard before sleep took him was the dragon speaking. Not in words, but in his mind. You saved me, human, and now we are bound. Eli Voss woke to warmth, not sunlight, but heat radiating from a mountain-sized body beside him. The dragon had curled protectively around him during the night, its wings forming a partial dome, shielding them both from Epsilon 7's cold winds. Eli blinked groggily, muscles aching, until the memory of last night hit him like a freight hauler. The crash, the alien dragon, the wounds, the voice. He sat up slowly. The dragon stirred. I thought I dreamed you, Eli muttered. The dragon shifted its head, nostrils flaring with breath that steamed in the morning air. Its massive eye opened, golden and intelligent. It didn't speak aloud. Its voice once again entered his mind, deep and echoing like a temple bell. You did not dream, Eli Voss. You saved me. And now / you carry my name. Eli's brows furrowed. Your name? My true name, the voice rumbled, is Zervereth. I am the last apex vanguard of the Krylon brood. Once the scourge of stars. Now / abandoned. It paused. Pain laced its voice. I was betrayed by the obsidian throne, my own kind. Enslaved with a binding collar and forced to burn worlds for their conquest. When I resisted, they left me to die in battle. Eli stood, brushing off dirt. And I just happened to be the guy who picked you out of the fire? No, Zervereth replied. It is no accident. My kind believe in ancient bonds, life debts. When one saves a dying vanguard, that act weaves a tie stronger than blood or chains. Eli laughed bitterly. So what? You're my pet now. The dragon's nostrils flared, and for a moment, Eli swore the air itself got heavier. I am not your pet. I am your equal. But from this day forward, I serve you. Not by command, but by oath. Eli blinked. Why me? Because you had no reason to help. You gained nothing. That is what makes you worthy. The silence that followed was heavy. Eli looked at the horizon. Already he could see shuttles in the distance. Colony patrols. Someone had noticed the crash. You have to go, Eli said. If the colony sees you. I will not run, Zervereth said. But I will not bring death to your people either. The dragon slowly lifted its wings, even though they trembled with pain. Eli stared as Zervereth moved toward the canyon beyond the ridge, his body massive but graceful. Before disappearing, he looked back. When you are ready, call my name, and I will return. Then the dragon vanished into the hills. Back at the colony, things were already unraveling. Reports of an unknown creature near the crash site spread fast. The colonial authorities were wary. No wreckage suggested anything human, but nothing had been recovered. Just burn marks and deep clawed impressions in the soil. Eli didn't speak of it. Not yet. Not to them. But that night, under the stars, he sat on his porch and whispered into the wind. Zervereth. The sky didn't answer. But far beyond the ridge, golden eyes opened in the dark and watched. Eli barely slept the next few nights. The colony was tense. Patrols doubled. Satellites scanned the terrain. Drones buzzed overhead. Something had triggered planetary defense alerts. Unregistered thermal signatures, traces of radiation, clawed tracks that didn't match anything in the colony database. But worst of all was the visitor that arrived 3 days later. Not human. The dropship touched down like a predator descending. Matte black with crimson insignias, its surface shimmered with reflective shielding that made it hard to focus on. The ramp hissed open, and 3 figures stepped out, tall, armored, in exosuits that pulsed with dark energy. Alien bounty hunters. The leader removed her helmet. Her skin was dark violet, her eyes pitch black. Scars curled across her cheeks like tribal brands. I am Varaxa of the Ashen Teeth, she told the colonial governor. We are here for the vanguard, known as Zervereth. You will stay out of our way. Eli, watching from the crowd, felt his stomach drop. How did they know? He slipped away before they could scan the crowd. He had to warn Zervereth. Eli sprinted through the low hills at dusk, past warning markers, past the burnt tree line from the crash. He reached the canyon where the dragon had vanished days ago. I know you can hear me, he said into the cold wind. They're here. They came for you. Silence. He waited. Then, a rumble. The ground trembled. Dust rose from cracks in the rocks. Then, with a gust of heat, Zervereth emerged from the shadows above. Still wounded, but regal. A force of nature. I know who they are, the dragon said into his mind. Ashen Teeth. The Obsidian Throne's executioners. They're armed, Eli said. Heavily. They want you dead. I am not surprised. Eli stepped forward. But I won't let them hurt you. Zervereth tilted his head. You would protect me? Even against your own kind. They're not my kind. Not if they hunt beings who only want freedom. A pause. Then the dragon's massive wings spread, casting a shadow across the canyon. Then let it be known, Zervereth said solemnly. From this day forward, any who threaten the bond between Eli Voss and the last vanguard will know only fire and death. The Ashen Teeth were fast. They traced heat trails, set traps. On the 4th night, they found the canyon. The ambush came fast. Plasma lances, arc nets, sonic disruptors. The first bolt struck Zervereth's flank, burning scales. The second missed Eli by inches. Run, the dragon roared. Not with his voice, but with sheer willpower that echoed across Eli's mind. But Eli didn't run. Instead, he picked up the discarded arc rifle of a fallen hunter. It buzzed in his grip. Unfamiliar. Dangerous. You don't touch him, he shouted, and pulled the trigger. The plasma blast struck the shoulder of the nearest attacker, spinning her into a rock. The rest turned. For a moment, the human and the dragon stood back to back. Now, Eli whispered. Show them who you are. The sky lit up. Zervereth unleashed fire like a dying star. The canyon shook. One hunter screamed, armor melting. Another tried to escape, only to be caught midair and crushed by the dragon's jaws. In minutes, it was over. Only Varaxa remained, pinned beneath a burning boulder. She looked up at Eli with loathing. You protect a monster, she hissed. Eli stepped closer. He saved me. Now I saved him. Varaxa's breath rattled. He'll destroy you eventually. No, Zervereth said, looming above her. You don't understand humans. And with that, he turned and walked into the smoke. Eli followed. Together. The aftermath of the battle left the canyon charred and scarred, but Zervereth was unharmed, his scales toughened by centuries of battle. Yet Eli, though grateful, could feel the tension mounting. The Ashen Teeth were not the last to come. The real threat lay ahead, the Obsidian Throne. For the first time, Eli saw a flicker of unease in the dragon's eyes. I have fought for centuries, Zervereth rumbled as they walked through the remnants of the battlefield. The Obsidian Throne is not an enemy to be taken lightly. They control many worlds, and their wrath is a storm that will swallow entire star systems. Eli adjusted the straps on his pack, his heart heavy with the weight of responsibility. But we're not going to let them take what's ours, are we? No, Zervereth said with finality. We'll fight. Together. The next day, Eli sat with the colony's leaders in a hastily constructed command room. Zervereth stood silently beside him, his massive frame looming over the table, causing many of the leaders to glance nervously at each other. They hadn't yet come to terms with the fact that a dragon, an apex predator, was now their ally. But Eli couldn't afford to care about their comfort. We need to prepare, Eli said, his voice steady despite the undercurrent of fear in the room. The Obsidian Throne is sending more than just bounty hunters. We've already seen what they're capable of. The moment they realize they've failed to capture Zervereth, they'll come in full force. The governor looked at him, uncertainty in her eyes. And what can we do? We're a mining colony. We don't have the resources to fight a full-scale invasion. Eli's eyes locked with Zervereth's. But we do have something they don't. The dragon's lips curled into a thin smile. Courage. And fire. Eli turned to the holographic map projected in front of him. The galaxy's maps were constantly updated, but they didn't show what Eli feared most: the reach of the Obsidian Throne's military. His eyes traced over the clusters of stars that dotted the map, their distances growing further the deeper he looked into enemy territory. Zervereth's tail flicked with impatience, and his deep voice rumbled again. I'll need to speak with the Vanguard. If we are to have any hope of defeating the throne, we must unite the dragons. But it will not be easy. The warlord who commands them, Talrath, is an ancient foe, as old as I. Eli knew that his next task was even more dangerous than the last. He would have to venture into the heart of enemy space, where Talrath, the warlord, ruled. But if they had any hope of surviving, they needed an army that was as fierce as the thrones. 3 days later, Eli found himself on a small transport shuttle, accompanied only by Zervereth. The stars outside the shuttle windows seemed like cold pinpricks in the vast blackness of space, each one a potential threat. Eli's hand gripped the metal railing as the shuttle shook during entry into the atmosphere of a remote planet. Zervereth's head was lowered in silent thought, his eyes glowing faintly as he prepared for what was to come. They landed on a rocky plain, the sky overhead crackling with distant storms. As they stepped off the shuttle, the air felt thick with tension. Zervereth's voice was low. This is the ancient ground of the Draken, the Vanguard's home. Eli followed him as they trudged through the desolate terrain, their footsteps crunching on the cracked earth. They arrived at a massive stone structure carved into the mountainside, an ancient temple to dragons. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Eli's hand instinctively went to the sidearm he kept holstered, though he knew there was no real use for it against an army of dragons. From the shadows of the temple, a dark figure emerged. Talrath. The warlord's form was imposing, his scales a mixture of obsidian black and deep crimson. His wings were as vast as mountains, and his eyes burned with a fire that could melt steel. You've come to beg for my aid, Zervereth? Talrath's voice was like the grinding of rocks. Do you think your human will be enough to change the course of this war? Eli stood at Zervereth's side, unwavering. We don't beg. We fight. And if you join us, we'll destroy the Obsidian Throne together. For a long moment, Talrath studied Eli. His gaze was cold, calculating. You speak with confidence, human, but you are no warrior. You have no idea what it means to stand against the throne. Eli looked Talrath dead in the eyes. I don't need to be a warrior. I just need to do what's right. Zervereth growled low, stepping forward. Talrath, you have always been proud. But there are more important things than your pride. The throne will crush us all if we don't unite. Talrath's expression remained unreadable for a moment, and then, slowly, he nodded. Very well, Zervereth. But know this, if we fight, it will be for the future of our kind. And I will not stand by and let anyone question my leadership. His wings unfurled, blocking out the light. Lead us to battle, and we will crush the Obsidian Throne together. Eli exhaled in relief, but his heart was heavy. The warlord's allegiance came with conditions, but it was a start. Together, they could defeat the throne. But they were not yet prepared for what awaited them. With Talrath's allegiance secured, Eli felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. The dragons were an unstoppable force when united, and now they would have the strength to face the Obsidian Throne. Zervereth, Taureth, and the Vanguard dragons stood together in a mighty alliance, and Eli was at the center of it all. But even as their armies began to gather, there was a dark sense of impending doom. The throne was no ordinary enemy. Their power was unfathomable, and Eli had seen firsthand the devastation they could unleash. As the dragons prepared for war, Eli found himself once again in the command room of the mining colony. His eyes were locked on the holographic map showing the stars and the routes the throne would take to invade. The plan was clear. They would intercept the fleet at the edge of the system, where their forces would have the element of surprise. But as the fleet mobilized, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The throne was smarter than they had given it credit for. "We need to move faster," Zervereth growled, his voice like the sound of thunder. "The throne will be upon us in days, and our forces are still scattered." "I know," Eli replied, staring at the map. "But we have no choice. If we wait too long, the throne will arrive with overwhelming force." Taureth stepped forward, his massive frame dwarfing everyone else in the room. His crimson eyes glowed with fiery determination. "The dragons are ready. We are prepared to fight and to die, Zervereth. But we must strike before they reach us." Eli nodded. "We strike first. We'll take them by surprise." The next few days were a blur of preparation and strategy. Eli, Zervereth, and Taureth coordinated their forces, gathering both the dragons and the human soldiers into a unified front. As they readied for the battle of their lives, Eli couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The future of two species now rested on their shoulders. Finally, the day of the battle arrived. The atmosphere on the battlefield was thick with tension, and the sound of dragons roaring in the sky echoed through the valley. Eli stood beside Zervereth, looking out at the vast sea of dragons and soldiers, each preparing for the bloodshed that was about to unfold. The first wave of the Obsidian Throne's forces came into view, massive warships, their dark hulls gleaming in the cold light of space. Behind them, an entire fleet of fighters and ground troops followed, ready to claim the galaxy for their ruthless masters. "We need to act now," Eli said, his voice firm. Zervereth gave him a final nod. "Prepare yourselves for the future of our worlds." As the battle began, the sky was filled with the deafening roar of dragons and the shrill cries of enemy fighters. Zervereth and Taureth led the charge, their immense wings cutting through the air as they engaged the first wave of enemies. Eli, aboard a small command ship with a handful of soldiers, directed their forces as the battle raged on. The dragons were fierce, their fiery breath lighting up the sky as they tore through enemy warships. But the Obsidian Throne was not an easy enemy to defeat. Their ships were heavily armored and armed with devastating weapons that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The human forces fought valiantly alongside the dragons, their ships launching precision strikes at the throne's vessels. Eli's strategy was working, but there was still a long way to go. Suddenly, a massive warship appeared in the distance, its hull covered in blackened armor. It was the flagship of the Obsidian Throne, the Obsidian Tyrant. Eli's heart sank as he saw it coming closer. "That's the one," Zervereth muttered, his eyes narrowing. "The Tyrant. Its weapons are unlike anything we've seen. If we don't destroy it, we'll be doomed." "We'll take it down," Eli said, his voice determined. "Prepare the bombers." The final push had begun. The human fleet launched their bombers, while the dragons continued their aerial assault. Zervereth and Taureth engaged the Tyrant head-on, their firepower a devastating force against the massive ship. The battle seemed to stretch on for hours, but as the sun set, the tide began to turn. The Obsidian Throne's fleet was being torn apart, their ships exploding in a fiery blaze. The flagship was slowly crumbling under the combined assault of dragons and humans. With a final, thunderous roar, Zervereth and Taureth unleashed a final, coordinated strike, sending the Obsidian Tyrant crashing into the surface of the nearest moon. The explosion that followed could be seen from light years away. But even in the wake of victory, Eli couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. The throne had been defeated, but at what cost? As he stood beside Zervereth, watching the remnants of the battle unfold, the dragon spoke softly. "We have won, human, but the war is not over. Eli nodded grimly. I know, but at least we've shown them that we can fight. Together, the humans and dragons had won a decisive battle, but the war for the galaxy was far from over. And as long as the Obsidian Throne still existed, there would be more to come. But for the first time, Eli felt a spark of hope. The galaxy would not fall. Not today. The end.